All right, so where I'm standing, of course, this is a historic area. This park that we're in is Alfonso Wells Memorial Park. Alfonso Wells was a community organizer who lived in this neighborhood and did a lot of organizing, a lot of activism in this neighborhood, fighting for the residents, and sometimes fighting for the residents against city government in some cases. And he's on the mural here. He is the white-haired gentleman that you see pictured over there. Can y'all see a white-haired gentleman over there? Most of us is to our right. That is Alfonso Wells. This park was created by the people in this neighborhood. It was a small park, playground first, and then as the neighborhood really created this park, the city got involved in expanding it. That's how a lot of stuff happens in the city of Detroit. People in the neighborhood do it first. And they get working, and then as they're working and it's really doing good, the city then gets involved. A lot of stuff doesn't happen with the city starting it. The city doesn't start it. It's the community folks who start it, and then the city joins in later. Well, we're here. I'm going to read this and then make comments to kind of put it in a good context. After World War I, the Great Migration brought thousands of Southern blacks to northern industrial cities, including Detroit. In 1910, according to the U.S. Census, 95% of African Americans lived in a southern state. In 1970 census, 55% of African Americans lived somewhere other than a southern state. We call that period in between the Great Migration, when over half of the African American population left the South and ended up in the West, in the Midwest, where we are, in the East, all these places that weren't the South. And of course, they're leaving for jobs in most cases. There's job opportunities that exist in Pittsburgh, in the steel industry, in Cleveland, in the oil industry, in Chicago, in the railroad and meat packing, in Detroit, in the auto industry. In 1914, Henry Ford offered $5 a day to all workers, which is about the equivalent today of about $250. So he's doubling the salary of his factories and most factories in Detroit. Most factories in Detroit pay about half that. But he's going to double that because he needs a lot of workers on his moving assembly line. Now he's building cars on a moving assembly line. He needs thousands of workers. And two things he's going to do to get these workers is, number one, heighten the salary. That'll bring more people to try to apply for those jobs. And number two, offer it to everybody. Right. Because the auto industry discriminated against people, particularly African Americans, but not only African Americans, but especially African Americans. You couldn't get jobs working in the auto plants. And if you did get a job, you were a janitor or a window washer. So you weren't getting paid factory wages. So Henry Ford will be the first of the major auto companies to break from that policy. He practiced it too, but he's the first to break and begin offering same wages to African American workers, but not same work. So these African Americans who will work at Ford Motor Company during this time period, they don't work on the assembly line. They work in grinding and sanding, and they work in the foundries. And the foundries, of course, is where the metal, the molten metal is created. And that metal, if a piece of it lands on you, you don't have that piece of you. So if a piece of that molten metal lands on your foot, that toe or that part of your foot is gone. If it lands on your finger, finger's gone. So it's the most dangerous, the most difficult, and the most dirty job. All right, so black people do work in the factories. They do get paid $5 an hour. $5 a day, $5 a day. But it's the most dirty, dangerous, and difficult job. But compared to being a sharecropper in Mississippi, black people say, I'll do it. I'll take that. Because a sharecropper or tenant farmer in Mississippi is just one step away from slavery. Right. So that's what they're leaving. They're coming for these jobs, but they're leaving Southern Jim Crow. They're getting away from being dang near enslaved, where you work and you do not get paid in cash. You get paid in crop. And so they pay you a share of the crop. Sometimes it's a portion of the land. That's what you farm. You got a good year, you got a nice amount of cotton per year. You go sell that, that's your pay. And you charge you rent. And charges you to charge you to use this tool. And by the time you're done with all those charges, you're in debt. And so now you got to work the next year to pay off the debt. But guess what's going to happen next year? You're going to be more in debt. All right? And so it's a step away from that. And there's a violent version of Jim Crow in the South. There's a lynching every day in a southern state between 1880 and 1970. So every day there's somebody being, most of these people are black men, but they're also black women and children. Right? So this is, everything is segregated, everything's unequal, and any kind of move towards resisting that inequality ends up in a lynching. And some whole cities are wiped out. Some old black towns are just wiped out during this time period. So black people are leaving that too. They're leaving the very violent version of Jim Crow that exists in the South, and they're also coming for the job opportunities that exist outside of the South. Right? So that's why they're here. Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, the city's segregated black neighborhoods became severely overcrowded. So now they get to the city of Detroit and they run into northern Jim Crow. Northern Jim Crow, it's not a lynching every day in the northern state. There's some lynching, but nowhere near what's happening in the South. There's no sharecropping in the north. You can vote in the north. You can't vote in Mississippi, like you can't register to vote in Mississippi or Texas or Alabama or Georgia, but you can vote in Detroit. So you can run for office in Detroit. So that kind of segregation does not exist in Detroit. But you cannot live wherever you want to live. So housing discrimination is a major form of Jim Crow in Detroit. But also schools are unequal. Police brutality is rampant against the black community. So these are the northern vestiges of Jim Crow. So of the northern version of Jim Crow. Not the same as the South, but it's like the other side of the coin, all right? And so African Americans are overcrowded in Black Bottom. It has enough housing for about 30,000 people. There's 140,000 people in this room. So it's way overcrowded. So black people are moving to Detroit and they're looking for other places to live. And they come we are about as far away from Black Bottom as you can be, still be in the city of Detroit. We come way over here where it's open land. Ain't nobody really doing it. Start building their own shack. Like building their own shack. They're living here kind of secretly. The streetcar system is pretty good in those days, so you can get almost anywhere to work if you get to the streetcar. So you walk from here to 8 Mile or walk from here to Woodward, and then you get on a streetcar. You can get to work, but you live way away from everything else. And since nobody lives here, you don't have to worry about discrimination. You don't got to worry about house discrimination. You build your own house on these big empty spaces. So they're living here secretly, incognito. Ain't no day here. It's just them. Once you do build something, yes, the city will accept that.
Back then,
yeah.
also? Oh.
So they build in their house, but what they're hoping for, they build the house, they shacks, they lean-tos, they shotgun homes, they build them, and eventually get a bank loan to build a real house, a mortgage. They can build them a real house. That's what they want to do. They want to establish themselves in the 20s. You got a significant number of black people living in the area we're standing in right now. And they're trying to create a community, trying to get some loans, trying to eventually make a real house neighborhood, real residential neighborhood. Right? Yes.
What bank was actually making loans to white people?
That's what they want. I ain't saying that's what they're going to get. That's what they want. They want the banks to give them loans. Again, northern vestiges of housing discrimination, of Jim Crow is housing discrimination. Housing discrimination includes that. So the number one form when they get here in Detroit, the number one form of housing discrimination is a racial covenant. In the deeds of many homes in Detroit, it says this house cannot be sold, rented, or leased to a Negro or colored or whatever name they're using for black people at that time. Some will get very specific. It'll say, this house cannot be rented, sold, or leased to a Negro, and the Negro cannot reside on its premises. That means they can't even stay there overnight. And some will say, this house cannot be rented, sold, or leased to a Negro, but a Negro can reside on the premises if they are the employee. So that means if you're a maid or the butler, you can stay. But outside of that, you can't even stay. And then they will say, some will be even more specific. This house cannot be rented, sold, or leased to a Negro, but a Negro can reside on the premises if they're the help, but they must enter through the back door. And so then you start getting houses that are built with racism in the architecture. So there are neighborhoods that didn't have back doors. They now they do, because this is the new component of home building that has entered in architecture. Build homes that have a back door that black people who work there can go through the back door. So this is northern version of Jim Crow. But black people say, we're the only ones here. They believe that one day they're going to be able to make this a real community. And they're living here. And then, in the Detroit Urban League responded by helping 7 black families on land near the edge of the city, one of the few places in Detroit where blacks could buy and build their own homes in the 1920s. All right. Then, in 1934, in the middle of the Great Depression, Roosevelt is the president. He's a progressive Democrat. He has a number of his policies that are passed, and they're called the New Deal. And one of those policies deals with housing. The federal government has now got into housing. They passed the National Housing Act of 1934, which, since the Great Depression, if you tried to get a bank loan during this time, you were working class, you tried to get a home loan from a bank, the bank would say no. The Great Depression, they don't trust you. They're not going to give you a home loan. They're like, hey, you got a job today, but maybe next month, that job might be gone. It's the Great Depression. That's happening. People have a job for a while, and then that place closes because it's the Great Depression. So the banks, they don't want to give no loan. If they do, they want to charge you some exorbitant interest rate, 9%, 10%, 11%. On a home loan, that's crazy. So some people say, I don't want the loan. Other people want a loan and can't get one. The federal government gets involved because the administration, you have a lot of progressives running in this administration. They're like, hey, let's get involved in housing. And the Federal Housing Administration and the National Housing Act is passed. And now banks are being told to give the people a loan. And banks are like, well, hey, they might have a job today, but they might not have a job tomorrow. And the federal government says, give them the loan. The bank, okay, we'll give them a loan, 8% interest rate. And the federal government said, no, we're not going to give it to them at 8%. We're going to give them at 3%. Some people 4%, that would be high. 2% for some people. 1%, some people even get 1% interest rate loan payments. That's almost money for money. And the bank said, what? These people got a job today, but they might lose their job. They're going to default on this loan. The federal government said that they default, we'll pay. The bank said, oh, okay, we'll do it. And the bank started giving home loans for working class people. And all over the country, but I'm talking about Detroit. And so now people are getting home loans. These black people been living here since the 20s. They're like, yes, it's gonna go to us. We're about to get some of these home loans. Yes, we're gonna get a real house. We're gonna be able to do this. We're going to do this right now. But the FHA has a caveat. These loans cannot be given out in integrated neighborhoods. Neighborhoods have to be racially homogeneous. That means one race. A mixed neighborhood can't get loans there. Black Bottom is integrated. That's where most black people in Detroit live, in Black Bottom. It's integrated. Polish folks living there, German, Italian, Greek, they all live in Black Bottom. So it's an integrated neighborhood. So you can't get no home loan in Black Bottom. That's where most black people live, so most black people don't be able to get a home loan. The whites who live there used to be immigrants, but now they're the grandchildren of immigrants. They're white Americans now.
Yeah.
When they got here, they faced discrimination. They could not live wherever they wanted to live. They could not get hired wherever they wanted to get hired. But their grandchildren don't speak with an accent. Their grandchildren, in some cases, change their names to more English sounding names. Their grandchildren have better jobs than the grandparents had from the old country. They can move wherever their money says they can. So they take the FHA loan and move out of Black Bottom. They get a loan to leave Black Bottom. Because you can't get a loan in Black Bottom, they live in black people. FHA won't give you a home loan. So they get paid to move away from black people. That's really what's happening. And so Black Bottom is going to become predominantly black. By the end of the 30s, Black Bottom is almost all black. Because these whites are taking advantage of the home loan. They're moving out in droves to neighborhoods outside of Black Bottom. So black people, They work at Packard Motor Company. They work at Dodge. They work at Ford. They're like, Frank just got a home loan. We work together. We make the same money. I'm gonna go get you one of them. They go down to the office, fill out the form, give me one of them home loans. Frank just got one. We make the same money. If he got approved, I get approved. And the FHA says, you cannot move to the neighborhood with Frank because we don't give home loans to the integrated neighborhood. If you move there, it'll be integrated, and we don't give home loans to integrated neighborhood. So sorry, you can't get the home loan. Like, okay, I get it. Racially homogeneous. Can't move to integrated neighborhood. Black bottom has become all black. So whites have moved out. So black people are like, all right, I ain't want to stay here. I was trying to get me a new neighborhood, but since y'all said I can't get no home loan in the Frank neighborhood, well, black bottom is racially homogeneous now. It's all black. You one of them home loans. And the federal government says, we have another agency. We have another agency called the Homeowners Loan Corporation. And they've written maps and color-coded the maps of where we can give home loans out. If it's a green area, you can get the home loan, but not you, because if you move there to be integrated, you can't get a home loan. If it's blue, you'll probably get the loan, but it might be a slightly higher interest rate. If it's yellow, you might not get the loan. And if you do, it's definitely going to be a higher interest rate. If it's red, you cannot get the loan. All of black bottom is in the red, but the term redlining comes from. Yep. And so now the federal government is the #1 discriminator in housing. More than a racial treatment covenant that used to be the thing. More than the real estate steerers, real estate agents steering black people to some neighborhoods, steering black people to other neighborhoods. Yeah, that's bad, but the federal government surpasses all of that because they're denying 91% of African Americans home loans who are eligible. The only reason they're uneligible is because they're trying to get a home loan in a integrated neighborhood or an all black neighborhood. That's all that exists. It's either all black or it's integrated. And the FHA don't give home loans in almost either one of them. All right? So they're blocked from getting home loans. All right? The largest wealth building period in America's history, the federal government giving home loans from the 1930s to the 1970s. That's the highest wealth building period in America's history. Where working class people got a home loan. That's how most people build wealth. We know some people get wealthy. They invent something, or they're a great actor, or a singer, or whatever. That's how some people get wealthy. That ain't how most people move up in wealth. Most people move up in wealth by owning some land, owning some property. And the federal government is hoping that happens. They're picking winners and losers at this time. These black people work at Packard or they make the same money. Their income equal. 20 years later, white folks have a home loan and they bought a home. African Americans who made the same money, what do they have 20 years later? They have written receipts from the Brewster Project. The project is another part of it. Instead of them to do housing projects. Now anybody can live in these housing projects, but guess who ends up there? Because whites can choose to live in a project and get a home loan. Guess what most whites do? So African Americans are trying to get these home loans, but are being denied. They end up. This is artificial. This wealth inequality artificially created by the federal government. It's not that one group worked hard and the other one didn't. Right. They were working together in some of the same factory. But one got a home loan. Got a home loan for $8,000 in 1940. 20 years later, that home loan, that house is worth $40,000 or $50,000. You can use the equity to open up a barber shop, open up a cleaner, open up a little grocery store, send your kids to college, or maybe buy another home, rent one out, and you live in the other. That's how you build wealth. The federal government is basically giving one group of people wealth and keeping it from another. So, you got all these black people living over here, and you got this FHA loan starting. And so now, you got people getting home loans, a white developer starts building homes over there. Starts building homes over there. He wants to make all this money. Build all these homes, people come by him, they get an FHA loan, and he's just raking in all that money. All this FHA loan homes, he's getting all that money. So he's building a whole neighborhood of houses. But the federal government comes over here and says, excuse me, developer, it's black people over here. You ain't gonna get no FHA loans out over here because it'll be integrated. The developer says, it's all this I'd already start building a house. Hey, federal government, what if I build a wall
Oh, come
to
on.
separate my white development from where these Negroes live? The federal government said, oh, that'll work. Make it 6 feet. Make it a half-mile long. And so this wall will separate where black people have been living since the 20s from this new development built in the 40s. And so the wall is built in 1940 and 41. So the wall separates. Black people still trying to get along over here. Every white person who moves over there will have an FHA home loan, off rip. The black people who've been here since the 20s still fighting to get a home loan over here. During World War II, the city tried to build temporary defense housing in the area. So now you got this area where black people live and can't get a home loan. White people just moved over there with a FHA home loan built in. And now the federal government needs to make more housing for all of the workers, defense workers. They need some more housing for defense workers. And they don't want to put them on that side, where white people live. We're going to put them over here. Because y'all ain't got no more shacks over here anyway. Y'all ain't got no real houses. We're going to put them over here, over here. They're going to put defense housing for the defense workers. And the people who live here can't even get a home loan, but now they're about to be joined by defense workers. Bernice A., black woman, the Carver Progressive Club, where she lives. She's been here since the 20s. It's the late 40s now. And the 8 Mile Road Improvement Association persuaded the FHA to limit more housing. Right, so that's what they got done. During World War II, they built a few homes here and a few on the other side of 8 Mile in Royal Oak Township, which of course is a predominantly black neighborhood now. So that's where they were building. They weren't able to stop the federal government from building any. They were able to stop them from turning it into a whole defense neighborhood. Tear down the shacks that the black people built and make it all defense houses. So it ends up being that. And by the 50s, by the 50s, they were able to finally get home loans. Their success reinforced black homeowners. So it took the federal government building those defense houses in this area. Black people fighting for 30 years to get houses in this area, and white people start moving away. By the 50s, they don't even want to live over here no more. They live in across 8 Mile. So it took all of that for black people to finally able to get home loans. Let's go to the other side.
I have a question.
Yes.
What leverage did Bernice, Carver Progressive, and 8 Mile Road Improvements, what leverage did they have to do this?
So the main leverage they have is they have connection with some of the powerful people in Detroit. There are powerful people in Detroit who need black workers. They may or may not care about black workers. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they need them. So they're persuading them, hey, look, we work for you. Your business won't exist without us. You need to fight for us. You need to step up for us. They're using that to get the city along. And they're using the, and once they get the city along, the city is being used to go to the federal government.
Is this wall the exact same wall that
That's
was
that
there?
wall. Now we're gonna start over here. Constructed in 1941, the Burwood Wall decided the existing black community. They've been here since the 20s, so they're already here. The wall don't get built till 41. They started in 40, finishing in 41. So the wall go up in 41. Black people already been here for 21 years. It divides the existing black community in the 8 Mile Road area from Blackstone Park, a newly built white subdivision. James McMillan is the developer. The wall is a reminder of institutionalized racial segregation in the United States. For example, the 1936 FHA underwriting manual stated that artificial barriers could protect a neighborhood's value from adverse influences, such as inharmonious racial groups. Maps provided by the Homeowners Loan Corporation labeled black neighborhoods and other ethnic and low-income communities as hazardous for home loans, a process known as redlining. The Reverend Horace White, the first black member of the Detroit Housing Commission denounced the wall and led protests against its construction. By the 1950s, black families lived on both sides of the wall. That's another reason, another way that they were able to use leverage is that white folks don't live there no more. White folks moved to the suburbs. Being on that other side of the wall ain't far enough. So they moved to the suburbs. It's a lot of suburbs that were created whole cloth because of racial housing discrimination. So that in some cases, whites moved to another neighborhood in Detroit so they can get an FHA loan. I'm not saying these whites are racist. They want a home loan. And the only way they can get one is if they move away from black people. The federal government is bribing them to move away from black. We'll give you money if you move away. And so that's why they move. And so they move. But eventually, the federal government won't do that. They won't give you money to move to another neighborhood. You got to move out of Detroit to get an FHA home loan. So we got suburbs that are created. Some were integrated and become segregated. Some were created as white suburbs from jump. Most suburbs in the city of Detroit are federal government welfare plans. If it were black people who got those home loans, that's what we would call it. We call it welfare. But because it's whites who got these home loans, we don't call it that. But that's what it is. It's a welfare program. It's you get a home loan for $8,000 home, and 20 years later that home is worth way more. Now you be built up in wealth. So what happens in places like Detroit and other cities? What happens? If the federal government is funding it, you're gonna get more of it. So if the federal government is paying for homes and getting you a home loan, you're gonna have suburbs, more and more suburbs with single family homes. Because the federal government is gonna give you an FHA loan for it. So you get suburbs around the city of Detroit, wealthy suburbs, to this day, that their whole wealth is built on property taxes, the wealth of the home. There are suburbs in the city around the city of Detroit that when a Walmart or Amazon wanted to come there, they said, no, we don't want Amazon. We don't want Walmart. We don't want Meijer. We don't want Target. They can say no. Do you think Detroit would ever say no to one of those developers? Because they don't have the choices. Detroit because FHA loans stopped coming to Detroit because it became more and more black. So FHA loans got cut a little more and more. What does Detroit do? So if a factory wants to build here, Detroit, come on. So now you got the Marathon Refinery polluting the whole neighborhood. You got people in that whole neighborhood, everybody almost in the whole neighborhood dies of cancer. Whole neighborhood. City can't say no to that development because they don't get enough money from property taxes to say no. City can't survive without this kind of development. In most communities throughout this country, when you go to the black community, one thing you'll see, one thing that will let you know you in the black community is how many liquor stores you see.
Yep.
You'll know you in the black community when you see all these liquor stores.
Yep.
Why? Because those cities need some other form of development. They don't get enough housing development money. Because the FHA for many years practiced this. It's a grandfathered in massive loss of wealth that cities that have a significant black population and Latinx population have had to deal with. So in 1968, 1 week after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the federal government passed the Fair Housing Act in 1960, outlawing race-restricted covenants in the deeds. Remember those? Outlawing real estate steering black people to the black community, white people to the white community. Outlawing the federal government's own redlining and denial of FHA-backed home loans. Federal government outlawing its own practices. Finally, why did they do that? Because Martin King Jr. got assassinated and 150 cities went up in flames. And the Congress is trying to figure out what can we do. And all this stuff that they have been blocking for years, some of it gets passed. Let's say the Fair Housing Act of 1968 got fully enforced in 1968. Now it didn't, but let's say the federal government's like, you know what, from this point forward, we're gonna fully enforce this, right? When it got passed in April of 1968. April 11th, 1 week after the assassination of Martin Luther King. Now, black people, if that were true, go to wherever neighborhood they wanted to go to, or wherever they really got the money to go to. and get a home loan. They can go to Levittown. There's 3 Levittowns. All of them were built with FHA home loans. That's all Levittowns are welfare programs from the United States government. The original residents of all the Levittowns got an FHA-backed home loan. Black people couldn't get an FHA home loan to live in Levittown, even though it's a black man delivering all the sheetrock to Levittown. He can't live in Levittown. All right, so here we are. I didn't go to Levittown. When Levittown was being built in the 40s, house was $6,000. Black people were trying to get there, and they said, no, FHA, can't give you a home loan. Now it's 68. The federal government is fully enforcing the Fair Housing Act. We know that's not true, but let's say they were. Now they can go to Levittown to buy them a home. Houses are $260,000. So they have the right to live there, but it's an empty right because most black people won't have the resources to be able to live there. Most people have built their resources by owning homes. Black people have been blocked from these FHA home loans. We know some rich black people who just bought a house, but that's most people don't get rich that way. They get rich from owning property. It increases in profit and value over years, and maybe the next generation is wealthier than the previous generation. Not they started out rich and bought a house. That's not how most people do it. They was already rich and they bought a house and got richer. That's not how it goes. Is you working class, you get a home loan, and then you pay it off, and now the house is worth more than when you bought it, and then you use the equity or sell it and get a little bit more money, and that's how wealth is created mostly. But black people have been blocked from this, so this is an empty right. Nixon is the president, and he brings in the former governor of Michigan, George Romney, Mitt Romney's dad. He brings him to be the head of HUD. George Romney is what we would call today a moderate Republican. He says, I'm going to fully enforce the Fair Housing Act of 1960. And I'm going to start with a community in my state, Warren, Michigan, on the other side of 8 miles. If they don't let black people move there, they keep trying to stop discrimination, I'm going to cut off all federal money for roads, for piping, for all of that. And he threatens Warren. This is a Republican. He's threatening Warren. You don't comply with the Fair Housing Act 1968, you're about to lose federal funding. Warren said, we don't want no federal funding.
Oh, wow.
If it means we got to let black people.
Wow.
But that's what they care about. What they really start saying, Nixon, you got to do something about that. And he's removed from being the head of the bill. That's the Republican. Obama was president. And the end of history, just before he left office, his HUD office, he directs them to do the opposite. Well, not the opposite. What Romney was doing was the stick method. I'm gonna beat you until you do it. Obama's gonna do a carrot. We will give you more funds if you come up with plans to move different groups into your community. And then Trump is elected. He brings in another Detroiter named Ben Carson to be the head of his hood. And Ben Carson either does not know or does not care about these plans. And he says that plan is social engineering. And social engineering is always bad. And he gets rid of Obama's plan, which is kind of a light plan compared to what Romney was doing. But he gets rid of it, and we end up with continued housing discrimination, even though it's illegal. So we're living with the results of that. Most of the wealth inequality that exists right now is not because of slavery. It's still some because of that. But that ain't the major form. The major form, because by the time we get to the 20s and 30s, there's a large group of African Americans who have moved out of the South, and they're working in these factories, and they're making almost the same wages as white workers, even though they're doing, in many cases, worse work. But now the major part of wealth inequality is because of how FHA, the federal government being the largest discriminator in housing, is why schools are unequal. Because schools are financed almost all over the country through property tax. The reason why some areas have more wealth than the other is largely due to federal government policies. So school inequality is housing discrimination. They're the same thing. We just act like there's something different. The other thing is cities have to bring in factories and liquor stores and strip clubs. They have to bring in those kind of businesses because they need money. And they don't get as much money from housing and property. They can't deny developers in most cases unless they're willing to take a hit on income for that city, revenue for that city. So they open their doors to those kinds of businesses. So now we get more pollution. So environmental racism is housing discrimination. We just talk about it like it's something different. It's the same thing. And then wealth inequality is housing discrimination. All of these things are northern vestiges of Jim Crow. So black people left lynching. They left the fact that they couldn't register to vote in Mississippi. They left the fact that they couldn't run for office. They left the fact that they were sharecroppers and tenant farmers. And they came to this version of Jim Crow, which in its final result is just as sinister as the one in the South. So Detroit has suffered, many cities have, but Detroit has probably suffered more than a lot of cities because of this. Partly because of federal government policies and industries joining in with that. So we heard about auto industry bringing black people here. Well, Henry Ford will also be the major pusher of the Home Rule Cities Act of 1910 in the state of Michigan. The Home Rule Cities Act passed in 1910 by the state legislature says the city of Detroit and other cities, the city of Detroit cannot annex smaller towns and smaller cities if that city has a number population. I don't know what that number was. It might have been 10,000. It might have been, I don't know what the number was. And if the people who live in that city don't say yes to it. So the city is locked in. It can't annex the white suburb over there and have that income, that revenue would be a part of the city. So Detroit is surrounded by about 70 suburbs that are predominantly white that are wealthier than the city. And they don't have to do anything, they don't have to give one dime to the city. That's because of FHA policy, but also because these businesses, Henry Ford Motor Company, Dodge Motor Company, Chrysler, all three of them were also involved in making sure that happened. If you go to Houston and you move to a suburb of Houston, 10 years later, you are no longer in the suburb. You are back in Houston because Houston has annexed that suburb. So if you ever go to Houston, you know that Houston is humongous. It just keep going because they don't have a Home Rule Cities Act. They just keep on annexing those other cities. Detroit can't do that. Detroit is limited by the state law that was pushed by the auto industry in the 1910s. They were doing it because they didn't want to pay city taxes. But it has another impact on housing discrimination, school inequality, and pollution, environmental racism.
You said home rule, are you?
Home rule, yep. Cities have the right to not be a part of Detroit. So if you add, Detroit at its height had 2 million people. Today it has about 630,000. But at its height it had 2 million people. If you counted those suburbs that I just said surrounding Detroit, it would still be 2 million people. But Detroit can't annex those suburbs because of the 1910 Home Rule, which still exists to this day, has never been overturned.
One tried? Are they still
I'm sure people have tried, yeah. Especially Highland Park and Hamtramck, who are surrounded by the city of Detroit. Highland Park, of course, is suffering large. All right. Any questions before we get back on the bus?
The VA.
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for asking. And during World War II, again, this is a progressive Democratic administration. Let's keep that in mind. This is not a conservative. Roosevelt is a progressive. The New Deal, the FHA, that's a Roosevelt thing. That's not a Ronald Reagan policy. During World War II, Roosevelt, progressive, does not want to happen what happened in World War I. where all these soldiers came back and were poor and starving and didn't have any health care. They had a bonus army protest. He wanted that to happen. He's a progressive. He don't want that to happen. So he and Congress passed the GI Bill, 1944. You get out of the military, you're going to get access to a lower interest rate home loan, health care, training, education. You can become an electrician, a blacksmith, or you can go to college, or you got health care now, you can get a home loan. So, all great. A lot of black people went to war, they came back. Hey, get me a home loan. I served in World War II. I served in Guadalcanal. I served I stormed the beaches of Normandy. I'm got to get me one of these home loans. They get back. And VA, Veterans Administration, said, we don't know much about housing. We're going to turn over our housing benefit portion to the FHA. So the FHA runs the housing benefit portion of the GI Bill. And they implement the same rules that they already been doing since 1934. So most black soldiers won't even be able to get a home loan. Some do, but most won't. Most who should have qualified don't get it because the FHA is running it too. Right? So now you got even the soldiers who don't get it. What do a lot of black soldiers end up doing since they can't do the housing portion? They go to school, go to college. All of the HBCUs swelled in population after World War II because all these black soldiers are going to college. They're sending their kids to college with their GI Bill benefits. They're going to college. And so now, even the HBCUs have to hire more staff, have to hire more faculty, because there's so many people going to college, at least in the top. So that does happen. That's a benefit, but housing is not available, which is the number one way to do it.
Keep going.
Yeah, which is one of the cases, among many, for reparations. All right. Any other questions? Thank you.